decided to change it up. Give you a little more space.
Yeah, sit next to me, Tillman.
I just need some wing space. I don't know if I need to stretch or something, or if they say something, they react.
Someone is a big boy that knows what he wants.
Okay. You never know.
What? Oh man. That's why you email bitch shit NYC. Oh yeah. Perfect ad. Shit.
And that was a
Yeah, just bring water everywhere. You in front of me?
Yes. I'm ready to start whenever else is.
1 second.
I affirm identity is created through reactivity. Choice is the basis of normativity. 198. I must think of my as an individual to determine that this is possible only through experience of reactivity. Awareness must be normative. This involves setting an end, constituting my reason for making this transition, and then actualizing an end. The difference between an object merely restricts our freedom. An object that makes freedom possible, then not I resist our ends may be brought into conformity, but it cannot be the source from which we draw. A concept of those ends reasons are the only possible determinant that does not causally necessitate what we do. I cannot comprehend the summons of self-activity without ascribing a being outside me that wills to communicate a concept of the action demanded. The concept, another I is the condition for possibility of awareness of a reason for action. The function, a morality not cleansed or thus constructive as I does not aim to describe the nature of an objective good and bad, but rather answers questions that arise by nature of identity as individuals to make decisions. This is the cause of moral conflicts. Things except don't answer the absence of moral conflicts are resolved based on competing reasons. This is key to ethics. A self-reflection explains existence of practical identities, giving it independent normative enforcement. Shall yell and you choose which desire to act on when you deliberate as if there is something over you. The law by which you determine your acts is expressed of yourself. You perform practical identities, and these are the sources of reasons and obligation. Most are contingent. The reason for conforming to particular practical identities spring from your humanity as a reflective animal who needs reasons to act and live. And it is not a question of what obligation a specific individual has, but rather what is required by nature of being an individual. E.g., a book can be a romance or fairy tale, but it must be a book. Reason is an escapable vehicle, culpability, practical reason explains so we can be responsible for specific ends. E.g., why something being independently good creates a reason for action. See, something qualifies as an action, not a mere event, only if it is constituted by practical reasoning. Brutal calculation, but desire does not yield a premise for incidental reasoning because its conclusion represents a changeable state of movement. Personal not unity of its space, but personal thought of my reason. I wanted to be so let me do X. The unity of the phase of doing be consistent the fact that they all hang on that thought of I wanted to be represented a changeable state. These would not be views of movement, and I would not be doing BD. Strength of like accepting any ethical theory requires a choice to accept it by framework. Avoid continuous link by saying a priori reasoning is the basis of obligation. Practical reason requires universality of norms. Angstrom. All cognition is subjective, universal will believe a certain judgment counts as knowledge. It must be valid for every knowing subject. Rational cognition is a judgment that depends on a universal judgment principle. Reason is valid under its subject conception and for every subject capable of rational cognition. Practical cognition is efficacious. Facts are common knowledge for all of us since we use a perspective that is shared between persons to make judgments. Reason is partial like math. Nobody who has 2 and 2 won't get 4. Thus, the standard is consistency with universal law framing 1. Non-contradiction is the only contradiction. Self-repeating reasons are not reasons. This is not a question of application, but rather the structure of the maximal, not whether a given maximum do X to achieve A would be possible for everyone to do X and still achieve A too. Contained in the form of actions that I hold myself capable of pursuing and willing, my inability to be free is contradictory, so we must have as much external freedom as is consistent with others' freedom. 3 states make rights conclusive con. When I will something be mine, I declare everyone is under obligation to refrain from using that object. This involves acknowledging I'm under obligation for every other to refrain from using whose unilateral cannot serve as a course of law that would infringe upon freedom, so it is only a general, collective, and common and powerful that can provide everyone this assurance. Next. In the status quo, adolescents are neither to make enough choices to Jersey between Connecticut Supreme Court's rule against cancer. See the 17-year-old fighting prone or recommended chemotherapy for dermatological called chemotherapy poison, and has made it clear to her doctors that she does not want to go through with treatment. Adolescent patients are not included in decision-making. Dare to manual decay. Neither parents nor patients. Parents were given the opportunity to fully comprehend treatment patients with life-threatening diseases. Often do not have discussions earlier. They discuss the possibility of respiratory distress, and the extreme parents included the possibility of the patient and family from considering possible alternatives options. It is difficult to make all well-informed choices during severe respiratory distress. They must be included. There is coercion by the medical system. This coercions patients and do not understand the full context of treatment, and parents cannot act effectively on behalf of children. B. Adolescents who have lived through chronic illnesses are best off to make decisions. Jennings between various forms of treatment have been punctuated the entire childhood by adolescence. This will be a salient factor in capability. Life experience enhances decision making. When illness tends to give the more mature attitude towards death. So it means the adolescent is better. Choice is better when they understand treatment and their condition. Their life experience is different from parents, since by nature of deciding they haven't had a terminal illness, so the parents cannot act on the child's behalf, especially since issues of death can be hard to bridge. C. And if life treatment choices are subjective, it is based on competing values about whether they want to be kept alive as long as possible or avoid pain. So it is a decision that adolescents can make because they have experienced the situations and it is to find their identity. Deciding for them imposes a conception of the good by finding what ends they ought to pursue. This violates freedom. Ripstein. You are independent if your body is subject to your choice rather than anyone else's. You are entitled to see what purposes you will pursue. See, dying makes them realize their mortality and is a decision they consider their whole lives to do, not act on impulse. Parents often do since death is upsetting. By evidence, always and probability. There is consensus in the medical field that adolescents can make a no life choices. Burger 13. Adolescents younger than 18 are often educated about their illness. There is broad consensus among professionals, maybe as young as 10, are capable to make decisions and participate in decisions at end of life. E. It's their last chance to make choices for themselves. Jennings 15 terminal illness will foreshorten their life, but it need not deprive the lost time of experience of finding one's own voice and experiencing recognition of effective personhood. A passage of rights to self-determination also means death has no impact. It's not a question of if they die, but rather how thus the plan. Adolescents will have the right to make decisions regarding end-of-life treatment harming. To summarize, Lacan and clarifies the advocacy Lacan advances the position that any adolescent, irrespective of chronological age who experiences long-term illness, understands the illness with the benefits and burdens of treatment and comprehends significance finality that should decide whether to forego treatment. Should the adolescent not satisfy the criteria adolescents prefer, and should be a accommodated decision about foregoing life-sustaining treatment should be made jointly by parents and attending physicians. On review 1. Evaluate the world using a comparing worlds paradigm to clarify the negative beta must, but found unconditionally that parents make decisions regarding end-of-life treatment for adolescent advice. If in the plan for A clash, the two are diametrically opposed, so I ensure 5 clash on the core of the resolutional question. Key to education is a more topical session B. Equal predictability. You can inflict caseless which kills. Fairness in education is I cannot engage. Also prefer arguments and enable maximum clashes. You will engage all of the key to fairness and best argues break the comparison education that makes sense. Question assumptions we garner your impacts later. My interrupt access to the core of the topic list and people who disagree with adolescent autonomy and parents get to make the decision. So I create best division of ground B. Reciprocity I solve. I got playing strategies designed to escape debating the have to make me answer hard questions in the 1AR, which puts me at a strategic disadvantage that kills fairness. Topical version of the critique. Solve all of your offense. You can read a critical dissent or argue that your critique is inherently linked to my advocacy. Fairness is a voter since debate is a competitive activity, so no debater should be at an event always. Critique determines whether or not you can read in the first place. Skip the argument. And topicality is not VI for FI. When a counterintuitive the nature of T makes it an instance is a layer before theory and neg does not have to be topical, so I cannot turn always other just set the theory since it is intrinsic to structure theory, not a side effect or something to abuse 3. F gets 1AR theory and meta theory. A norm's creation of ensures that nav cannot be infinitely abusive, otherwise they always win 2. The theory ensures I can HQ theory 4. Theory shells with links of mission projection cross-sections which could disclose on the wiki they violate. If they read a spec shell value as predictability, there are infinite interpretations including bidirectional, so I can never meet B clash. This ensures you do since there is infinite spec shells. I cannot meet all of them because of time constraints. You go with the upkeep of fairness ensures is quality prep year round and also education, so we will make better arguments even specking trade off is also better. You ask me specific concerns to clarify. You need to give me an opportunity to comply with conflict the interpretation. Just reading it in for cross-sections is insufficient. Affirm.
Can you take out everything you didn't read?
Shit. I didn't read.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Okay. So under comparative worlds, can I just defend the squo? Is that like sufficient?
Sure. You just have to defend a US squo in which
Okay, cool.
parents make decisions.
Great. So, okay. So the third argument, what constitutes an omission? Like, I'm just curious, like, on how, if you read 1AR theory, like, how, like, is it based on the NC strategy, or, like, what is it specifically?
I'm confused by the question. Do you mean the reason that I get theory in the 1AR?
No.
Or the
Okay,
reasons that
so
things of
first, what
omission?
constitutes an omission?
Okay, so if you don't ask me something in cross-sec, so for example, a spec shell.
So is that also
like
true of
with-
1AR theory?
Is that also true of 1AR theory?
Yeah.
I mean, any sort of spec shell should probably be
I'm not asking about spec, I'm asking about 1AR theory.
It's not true of every shell. If I read a spec shell in the 1AR...
That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying if you read a 1AR theory shell, do you have to check with me also?
No, that's misunderstanding the function. You don't necessarily have to check every interp. It's just an interp where I didn't spec something in the app.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go through the framework. Explain the Wood argument.
So the Wood argument says that the way in which we create our normative identities is through choice. There has to be some sort of decision making, which occurs based on competing reasons.
So why is it specifically like a Kantian choice? Like, we need absolute freedom.
Why is it specifically absolute freedom?
Yeah.
So the other arguments in the framework establish that practical reason is the basis of normativity. So we must derive laws from the will itself.
Wait, so why can't we have like an interdependent form of autonomy instead of absolute, like a Kantian view?
Can you clarify?
Sure. So why can't we have a relational view of autonomy where we do not have absolute independence instead of like versus the Kantian theory?
There might be situations in which that's good. The app says that it's a violation of freedom. You basically have to have as much freedom as is consistent with freedom of others. If it's consistent with your initial freedom,
Wait, you have as
a
much freedom?
relational-
Isn't it you have freedom or you do not?
No. So the way in which we determine, or we do have freedom, the way in which we determine what we have the right to do is based on universalizability and constraining the rights of others.
What's the argument underneath the constructivist argument? Like, what's the impact of this argument?
The impact of constructivism, it just
Yes.
clarifies the ways in which ethical theories function. So for example,
So
a
to
theory
me,
about an
constructivism, what
abstract
do I have to
conception.
do?
You'd have to prove some sort of conception of how you derive ethics from the nature of moral questions themselves. So for example, a utilitarian theory that talks about an external conception of the good would be insufficient.
Okay. So explain this culpability argument underneath the Wood argument. Like, what does this argument say?
It says that practical reason is the way in which we are responsible
What's
for
the warrant?
specific ends.
This is like a 5-sentence. Like, it's like not even a sentence.
Okay, so it's an explanation of how you have to decide to do things in order to have it be attributable.
Why is that true of practical reason?
Why is it true of practical reason? Because otherwise that explains how things aren't just independent events, but rather are something that you caused.
Okay, that's fine. What's the impact of the Kant argument?
It's framing.
What is that? Like, can you explain?
It just clarifies the obligations of the government
What is that?
to maintain a system of equal freedoms. So, for example, if there's
Okay.
a rights violation, they would ensure that that is not.
Is the offense dependent on like a hindrance?
No.
So wait, what's the relevancy of the Kant argument? Like I want to know
Okay,
what
it's
you could do with this in
protecting-
the 1AR.
Okay, I can just make arguments as to why the state has an obligation to maintain. Like, for example, Kantianism doesn't generate state obligations. So
Okay,
let's take out.
starting prep now. Can you explain how I meet constructivism again?
So you'd have to derive the nature of morality from the nature of moral questions themselves.
So, give me like, how do I meet this? What does that mean? Like, give me simpler
Okay,
terms.
so I'll give you another example. If you read a framework that said that something was good in the abstract, that would be insufficient because it doesn't prescribe some sort of obligation. You'd have to have.
So I just
some
have to
sort
make
of
it like a guide to
derivation.
action.
Kind of.
Can you like clarify the argument? I don't want to
Okay.
like be clear.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't want you to extend this the next
Constructivism
speech.
Constructivism means that the function of morality is to answer questions. The question specifically is moral questions, so you'd have to answer why there are specific trade-offs or why we would have competing reasons for action, why we'd have to make some sort of ethical choice. If your framework explains that and that's where you derive morality from, then that would be fine.
Great.
What was that? That part is grass.
Why does the Jennings argument affirm? It just says that people who have the ability to make decisions. So why does that mean they ought to?
Because it says that individuals are, well, the freedom arguments are reasons that people who understand the ends they are setting should have the ability to set ends if it doesn't violate others. So
Okay.
it's not necessary, but it would preempt arguments like adolescents aren't rational.
Okay. So it doesn't affirm on face.
No, it's not an a priori.
So which ones? No, I mean it doesn't
Okay.
like actually like affirm. It just is a preempt.
Sure.
Okay. And does the Berger argument either? It just says that they can make decisions. Like all these arguments are just that they can make decisions. Why does that mean they ought to?
Okay, so
Like literally all of these arguments are just saying that.
because freedom matters. If it doesn't violate the freedom of others, then that's a reason that they should be able to make a decision.
51.
Can you flash me what you're
Yeah.
Great.
Should be everything.
What's the order?
One NC
Water bottle.
overview on the NC and then AC, but there's going to be an overview on the AF. You can fill that as an off or on the top of the AC. Oh wait, I need to put one thing. Okay, here you go.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Grass.
Let me write it down. Okay, is everybody good?
Wait 1 sec for me to open. What's the name of the flash drive?
Neal's FD. Okay, everybody good? I negate. Once we step into conceptual seem to give us theoretical practical reason. No, it's between conceptual seems joyous. Confirming spring with new terms accepting mathematics and prime number greater than 100 within the frame and confirming the jury the supposition is strive to confirming the accuracy of framing doesn't make sense from perspective. That's not the answer to the question. Do numbers say trivially yes from perspective, which has an attempt the only sensible way asking the question to accept the frame requires that there's nothing but possibly kind of the evidence that shows one way. There's no way to compare between ethical theories because they operate on different conceptual schemes. Mathematics can't be true more than physics because they start from different scientific starting points in the same nature. Individuals kind of weigh rights claims because those claims not compared against the others. Next, the sovereign unifies these assertions as a definer values perish. The sovereign's job is to be an ultimate definer. Peace is only possible to the degree that every general thinking is limited by the sovereign. The sovereign provides the necessary unity of meaning and reference and diffuses an interpreted clash of humans would fall inability to violence and natural condition only possible through the sovereign that a commonwealth avoids the dominant definition of problems that is typify the state nature. Third party arbitrary is necessary because a person's imputation of meaning and value to this they construct. A sovereign is necessary to stop conflicting claims and state nature because only has the power to assert a truth claim that no one else can refute. The standard is consistency with sovereign authority. Independently, every framework should avoid a regress of state nature. The state nature is worse than the state is necessary. So a point is that in the state nature, people like the assurance that their rights won't be valid, which was supposed to everyone's rights are valid indefinitely. Individuals must come together to form a state in order to ensure that rights is good. Only the state can solve this problem because it only has the power to sufficiently adjudicate relation to the citizens. The viewpoint is that individuals in the state nature argue over the extent of their rights. Individuals may agree that everyone has rights, but the problem arises in the application of such rights, i.e. arguing over property. In the state nature, it's impossible for each to argue their rights claim because they have no authority by which only a government that has capacity to resolve these rights claims between individuals as well because that's the objective adjudicator and its interests are based on the simple. The point is that my framework comes on a higher layer because it's a question of what the state obligations. Not only the AAC framework questions what the state out to do, except for maybe the Kant argument, but that is only impact calculus from your standard of how the state should act. But you know your actual framework justification just by how the state acts. So my offense comes on independently of first. Now negate two warrants. First, affirming isn't part of the state's duty since it's its duty to be the definer and prevent regress to the state nature, but not affirming doesn't legally doesn't lead to a regress to the state nature. Which means that SCO is actively good because it's consistent with state creating standards good. 2 under the NC, individuals don't have rights against the state making a right to autonomous decision making prohibited. Feinberg. Without rights, we can have property contracts and loan subject, and Hobbes have no right whatsoever against the sovereign. They give them no value against the sovereign would commit no wrong against them, and they cannot complain against them. They have no prior claims against conduct rights against one another would be owed directly to promises to be like, but rather to a single sovereign. And right implies that the state could just decide you can have protection of freedom of speech isn't a right if the government can take it away anytime you could decide to speak up. But a city defines moral force. So conditions that restrict sovereign are bad because by definition when they come up with the right would be defined as. But that's just what the rights are. As frameworks means we can have rights. Now overview. Either if you want to flow it at the off or on top of the AC. Overview. Their framework requires that agents are the cause of the action. Not specifically your major yelling car says if we need to talk about some sort of desire or we're going to talk about reflecting on desires, we need to have practical reason. But that's a question of whether you have to be the cause of your actions in the first place. We see that this isn't necessarily your framework requires that people are cause of action. If I prove that they're not the cause of action, that is a reason to negate because then adolescents are not don't have the ability to sufficiently will the like for example right to die instances. And now next, Merriam-Webster defines adolescence as a person developing the agents and adult as a fully developed. Further these definitions, A point is common usage. The most first definition on Google Merriam-Webster adolescence is the definition of basic common usage is key. It controls the internal equals arguments, but medical education to preserve problem claims on topic literature, even if the range of definitions of developing syrup as their offense would be non-unique. Now negate development means that in the face of completely desire they now have the groundwork to make authority claim Shapiro. An agent must develop completely impulses of complaints conceits before to have the authority to make an agent to act. Her has to determine which conform to her law. She can only fulfill decisive only for what's on effect. She cannot act as judge without authority. Laws this provides a distinction between developed and undeveloped. The developed agent, a human being, is one who's a volutational authority and fall damage agent is due to conflicting claims on the basis of something she cannot do that's conflicts and truly authority way for the lack of established contribution. The requisite critical expectation must give her a basic structure as a person. If undeveloped agents cannot choose between conflicting desire, they cannot see themselves as cause their action because they cannot act where conflicting desire. But all actions ultimately suffer from conflicting desire. So adolescents can a legitimate action always called an army. Says my army stems from underlying nature of agents. So empirical services always changing a little bit otherwise. Additionally, adolescents don't have a stable identity. The basic structure which will action Steinberg and Scott. Emergence of personal identities and development is task of adolescents. Identity formation includes considerable exploration and experimentation of their resolution. Does not occur until early childhood. Until the late adolescence, individuals' values, beliefs, and plans are likely to be exploratory explorations of adults have personal identities. And always the claim is that adolescents can never take decisions, but the adolescence is a time where humans don't have the ability to say identity will action. Brain armies don't take that because identity is key. She's going to try to leverage all the contention arguments. No, the claim is they're not mutually exclusive. My argument is that adolescence is a time where people are growing, not that they do not have the ability to make rational decisions. Which means that your arguments can't take it out. Now, overview on the standard. First, all our actions are contradictions consistent with universalized because we can live highly specific. Now, I can't will from a person that consistent will maximum steals from them from eating strawberries, but universally willing this principle doesn't carry the impossibility. Hence, we can instantiate every maximum specifying on particular terms, allowing it to pass a universal to reason may be ignored, but without only one. I value my reason, not value yours, without ever warranting why I must value your reason. 3, you can know that other people have minds and consciousness the same way we do. It's perfectly consistent with our rationale to believe that we are simply acting mechanically. And it's also possible to disagree empirically, as there's no way to determine which would be acted the same way we do. Would they operate completely machines? 4, simply being a rational agent is insufficient to be generating normativity. Enoch. Inescapably engaging in activity discerned as it isn't enough to have a reason to have the aim. You must also have a reason to engage in the activity. You still don't have a reason to be angel. We can define many variations as a check with slightly different rules. You don't have a reason to play. It's not true that engaging in some activity suffices for having a reason at the aim is considered. 5, you should complete 2 meanings of reason. 1, I ask why should I be rational? I don't make an appeal to my practical reason. Practical reason is merely a form of self-conscious that allows me to distance myself from my desires and choose between them. When I ask why in the case of why should I have rational, why I should be rational, I'm asking for a pure reason in the sense that I'm asking for justification, but I'm not conceding the normative force of practical reason. Now let's line the framework. On the Wood argument. First, all the NC arguments come on a higher level. Your argument is that we need to have some sort of theory of recognition where we recognize that other people have rights in the same way you do. But the point of the state right arguments that recognition kind of occurred unless we first have a state because we would just violate each other. Second, the NC comes on a higher level. Your argument takes this out because your argument presupposes that we can know that other people also have rights in the same way you do. But in this person, we cannot compare conceptual schemes. So we think we can recognize that other people have rights in the same way we do. Now your constructive argument. First, you don't let her extend this. Very unclear what this means in the last few. So again, your response to it. Second, do not come from sort of abstract ethical theory. The way that we can structure this through the sovereign, which means I meet your constructive argument in outways because that is the ultimate definer of truth. Which means that there's no contestation of how we understand truth. Now your yellow card. The first argument, the argument is that we need self-reflection to understand how we have practical identities. But there's no reason why we care about practical identity. My argument is that we just only care about whether the how we come about by truth, which means that was the entirety of the app because the AC is just a necessary of how we would determine obligations. Only the NC provides a guide to action. Second, even if we have we can weigh between our conflicting desires, I'm necessarily with means we can have some sort of mistakes. It's not the lead to universalizability specifically. So just now on your viewpoint on culpability, this literally has no warrant. Cold argument it literally just says that we cannot be responsible for our ends, but it's worth that no one's there. That means also she gets new extrapolation and argument in the next speech. The C point is that something qualifies an action if not merely dependent by constituted by practical reason. First, that's not irrelevant to the NC. It's not a question of how we understand action. Your argument is that might be that the NC doesn't have a conception of action, but insofar as that the conception of action that you defend is a bad one, because it leads to infinite violations of rights. It always outweigh the rights component. It always going to outweigh the action component because it's necessary to understand the truth claims that I understand. Even if actions, even if you can understand action, the say always comes on a higher level. Even if say as like arbitrary actions, it's still the way that we determine truth. So even if that is true, that doesn't matter. I know your Einstein argument. You say universal is known, but all arguments over you take that out, which means that it doesn't matter. Now go on the contention. First, turn rightful interaction between parents and adolescents entail due to dimension. Their duty only exists when children lack consent and Ripstein. In relation to possession, and people interact independently. If I'm repairing a crime, I'm allowed to take it for a drive to see if it's probably popular, but not to be your friend to do so would be to use it as a prisoner of popular. Most women in a relationship with your parents and children that until the your parents have a duty to act on behalf of children, a right to manage and develop. And second turn, adolescents don't second turn, respect for information does not require giving patients the actual ability to end their life. This makes it what it means to very value person's autonomy development. 14. There are two different ways in the sense of which a person's autonomy can value the way we value in the case of a patient's capacity for self-determination. We value particularly respect the person's autonomy by regarding necessity of sharing our reason with them among others that is constraining what values of where to reach. When we value values not facing capacity, but this opportunity for self-determination, having choices to make, and the means to which we depend on the goods as object of desire, respecting partners and the autonomy is not just giving them effective options, which turns the autonomy. She has no offense on the contention, which is 100% conceded. All her arguments have to do that people are just rational, but that is not sufficient to her friend because that just commits a fallacy. Just because they're rational doesn't mean they ought to be have autonomous choices, which means that none of the offense is relevant. Now I'll do quickly. I get new responses to these arguments because it's unclear how they apply in the next speech, which means that if she just stands in the next speech as a reason, for example, like the theory interpretation, I should be able to respond to the entirety of these shall because it's unclear.
Wait, we didn't read.
Sure. Can I get your computer?
Alright, when you're ready.
Good.
Do you get new responses to everything in the interview?
Yeah, I would say so.
Why is everything unclear?
Well, it's unclear, for example, like the application that you will use these arguments.
Okay.
like for example, like
Do you not
RBIs, I think is.
Look like?
Well, I tried to check with you in CX what comparative worlds would entail.
Okay.
I think I meet your interpretation.
The negative debater must defend unconditionally that parents make decisions regarding end-of-life treatment for adolescents. What don't you understand, Neal?
I think I've met that, but even if like,
okay,
you
that's
do,
fine.
I don't
Do you
know
get
if,
any
like,
responses to that one in the end?
I think I should because
Why?
if you're like extending a new application
Okay,
of that, I don't know.
I want you to explain what specifically you don't
I don't
understand
know,
about
like
this
I don't know how you're going to use it to take out, for example, arguments I read. So I should be able to respond to that new application that you do.
Okay,
I think that's
fine.
fair.
What do you think your burden is?
What is my burden?
Yes.
To negate.
What does it mean to negate?
I don't define like what negate means.
Okay,
but my
I want you
argument
to
is that
clarify what your burden is because the off you read seems to claim that it's
that's only
sufficient-
relevant under the AC framework. I will not
Okay.
like extend that as a nib.
Okay, fine. So all of the arguments you read.
Well,
about
I'd say like,
adolescents-
sorry, what?
all of the arguments, the Merriam-Webster arguments you read are not a nib. It's just
No, it's just a
term.
reason why underneath like any type of autonomous decision making, they need to be the cause of their action. Your framework requires that they are that.
Okay, that's fine. Is that a reason that parents should make decisions for adolescents?
The argument is that because they're irrational, that means they shouldn't get choices. Like,
Okay,
the
is that a
argument
reason that parents should make decisions instead of them?
The argument is not, that is extrapolation.
That is
not
a yes or no
My
question.
argument is not justified in that
Okay.
way, but that could be an extension of it. But I do
Okay,
not
how
justify
would
it
you extend
specifically.
this? That it's a reason that parents should make decisions instead. Do you have any comparative arguments?
My argument is that I
for
defend the
parents are better?
squo, which if adolescents do not have autonomous rights, then the parents do
Okay,
it,
that's fine.
right?
Let's
That's
go
the
to the
squo
top.
right now.
That's fine. That's fine. Let's go to the Joyce card.
Uh-huh.
Why does the fact that there can be multiple conceptual themes mean that we have someone else who has to tell us a conception of the
The
good?
point is that we cannot resolve conflicting claims of conceptual schemes. So we
Okay,
need
why
someone
does
who...
listening to someone else mean that we will be right?
It's not necessarily saying he's right, but the sovereign is the one who can ultimately unify all these things, and they're the only people who have the power to do so.
This seems to be descriptive. Why
It's
is
not
that a reason that
descriptive. I
we
don't
ought
think
to?
so.
Okay, why is that a reason that we ought to listen to them, independent of the fact that that's necessary?
Because they are the one who construct moral truth. My argument is that moral truth isn't, or like truth in general, is not understood through like ethical frameworks like you do, like the practical reason, because we cannot determine them because they start from different conceptual schemes. My argument is that the way that we determine by resolving that is through a ultimate sovereign, because it is the one that can assert moral truths.
That's fine. Joyce, the first argument, linguistic frameworks. You cut out the part linguistic. Why does this necessarily apply to
Doesn't
Kant?
matter if it's linguistic
Why
or
does
not.
it necessarily apply to Kant? I want you to specifically make that up.
Sure. So my few arguments. So the argument underneath is that we cannot compare between conceptual schemes because they start from different starting points. So one application I made from like on the AC was that we cannot compare between people's different practical reasons. Like for example, you and I have different conceptual schemes that we start for. So saying that I should value your reason is incoherent.
That's fine. Okay, you say that accepting math lets one say there's a prime number greater than 100 within the framework, proving the truth proposition of such is trivial, confirming the adequacy of the framework doesn't make sense. Why?
Okay, so the argument is
I want you to point me to a justification in the card.
Okay, so the argument. Do you want me to still just?
I want you to read the warrant.
Okay, so the argument is that, for example.
No, I want you to read the warrant.
Wait,
That's
it's an example. I don't know how to.
I want you to read the warrant from the card.
That I don't know what to tell you. That is the example
so
of the card.
no warrant in the card.
There isn't a warrant in the card. You just won't let me explain it.
I'm not asking you to explain
The argument, I don't know how much more clear the argument can be.
Okay.
It just gives an example as a warrant. I think that's sufficient to warrant an argument.
That's fine. You read turns to the app. You read turns to the app, yes?
I read one turn. Or sorry, two.
Okay, 101. New off. It'll be AC. Then it'll be AC. Then the off he reads. That's an overread of the app, and then NC.
Can you say that one more time?
New off. Then AC. The off you read NC. Okay.
Can you flash?
I mean, I'm not.
I'd like the interpretation.
Okay.
Like your reading theory.
That's fine.
flash drive.
Yes. Alright. When everyone's good.
Give me 1 moment. Okay.
Yep.
Alright, ready? A interpretation. The negative debater may not claim that they get new to in our response to the specific spikes and return to the F and read offense that claims that the agents must be the cause of their own action but are not. In the affirmative world and read an NC that says we should have consistency with the sovereign power be to all of these things. See, the standard is substantive engagement. That means that you have a multiple number of outs since you can go for since if I for comparing worlds in the 1AR, which is the burden that I defend at the bottom the AC, then you can dump on that and then you can but if I do not, you can send that and just go for turns on the F, which means that you have a substantive number of outs. Also, the reason that also it's specifically abusive because the NC is basically a nib. You just have to prove that there is no sovereign obligation, which means that you can collapse the entirety of the framework because there is no way for me to turn the NC, which also means that you have a greater number of outs kills. Education, since you will go for the argument and undercover, which means that we will never have questions. The assumption of the other ideologies also fairness, since best arguments are picked through comparison, also kills reciprocity, which means since you means that you have a greater since it means you have a greater number of pathways of ballots kills. Fairness, we need equal paths ballot to win. Is the voter education? Is the voters theory? Is the people debating schools? Fairness, is the voters the conditional obligation to vote for the better debate or not? The better teacher, which they cannot do if the round is inherently skewed. Drop the debater, set a positive norm, beat it or future basic back to my time loss on theory fairness. The theory is an issue from competing interpretation because reasonability is completely arbitrary. Do not vote on the two new 2 and RRVI because I do not have enough time to cover it. AC. First, extend 190. We exist by willing as this requires that there be rational others extend that the function of morality is constructivist and moral questions arrive from asking questions. That means that it takes out the NC because there's no error constraint each to this. Sovereign would never have the ability to act wrongly, which means that cannot explain the nature of moral question. That takes out all of your arguments. You say that all of the issue is that all of your arguments in the line by line are contingent on empirical circumstances. For example, you say that we would just violate other individuals. No, it's not a question of what we would do, but rather what is nature of the nature of morality. You say that it presupposes that we know other individuals. No, but it is necessary by knowing yourself that you know that there be others because that is the only way that the causa because if this were not true, the external world would be governed by laws which would causally necessitate how X and Y could not be free. That's conceded. You have also to make arguments because you say that the sovereign derives what counts as reason, but no, sovereign does not derive because that would causally necessitate what we do, which means that we would have no ability to have moral principles. This also takes out Skep and determinism. It does not matter if we are rational, but rather it is a conditional statement that says given that we are rational, then that resolutional statement exists, which means that the entirety of the NC goes away. Also, all of your arguments about how principles are not universalizable goes away because that would not be able to bind us extend. Extend Mitchell Yale, and it is inevitable other obligations spring from our rationality, which takes out your NC. We would have no ability to accept the sovereign as the sovereign as the one who is able to lead us. The sovereign would also be bound by practical, or the sovereign would be bound as practical reason, even if they were defining our identity, which means that there are certain constraints on which they would act, which outweighs your arguments, since that is the only way we can have some sort of obligation to act. Extend that non-contradiction as a contrary to all things, but you know, but you cannot aggregate a contradiction that's related to the maximal that takes out all of your arguments about how we do not have to have some sort of knowledge about how things can be infinitely tailored, because we have to look to things that are intrinsic to the nature of the maximal, which means that things like I am wearing red shells are irrelevant. Also, extend that freedom is a contract, since you cannot will know freedom, which is an intent-based conception of ethics. Extend Jennings, adolescents who have lived through chronic illness are best apt to make decisions. And extend the C point that end of life treatment is subjective. There is no right answer. Deciding imposes contempt for the good. And extend Ripson that you're impeded if your body is subject to your own choice. If individuals who have the ability within a given circumstance it violates their rights since freedom matters. This outweighs your arguments on specificity, since it talks about the significance of the resolution. No one else would have a better conception of whether adolescents have a right. Extend to the interview. Extend the burden that the negative debater has to unconditionally defend the parents, makes decisions regarding end-of-life treatment for adolescents. Now, must defend the plan. That means that all of your comparing worlds arguments go extend class. The two are diametrically opposed to y and survive for the class that matters. Do not enable him to go for new 2 in our response on this. A point is rescue. I do not have the ability to leverage anything from the absence. He will always have more speech. And B point is that it's very clear. I have clearly specified the burden. You could have facts and cross-up which solves all of your reasons. That better if you're held to that interpretation. That also applies to constructivism. I was very clear in cross-up. The fact that he hasn't read enough philosophy is not a reason that you should put me down. The Off of on course grade, you say that if people are the cause of the action, that is sufficient to negate, but no, it's not sufficient to negate. Rather, it is a comparative question about who is best at. You've conceded analysis that the adolescents are the only one who understand the situation. Also, your arguments about how adolescents do not have the ability to choose to die are not applicable because it's a question about a situation in which they are inherently going to die. Group all of your arguments, you say that we cannot derive things from themselves, but we derive things from the nature of the world itself. It doesn't require some sort of expectation of external freedom. That is the reason that things are universalizable.
Okay. I had
50.
Yep. What was the internal link to education?
Substance
Like just
engagement,
clash? Okay, great. So wait, what's the reason why you can't engage? I'm very confused. You just claim the NC is a nib without ever justifying why it is.
No, so I said that the NC is a nib because you just say that we have to look to things that are sufficient under.
Wait, what?
No, okay. The NC is a nib. I mean, you know why it's a nib, Neal,
Wait,
but I can explain to you.
You just think I'm being
Okay,
sketchy for no reason.
you
It's
say
very
that
fair
anything-
NC.
Okay. You say that we have to look to consistency with the sovereign power, which means that there can be no sort of obligation because it's the nature of just what the
What?
sovereign wants
Okay,
to.
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna flash new stuff.
Cool.
Theory overview. Okay, order substance starting on the NC, then the AC, then the theory shell sheet reads. Okay, everybody good? You probably should have responded to the Joyce argument topic. Send that once we have shows conceptual scheme, they give us theoretical practical reason, no way compared to conceptual schemes. That takes out the entirety of the AC framework. Even if you win your constructivism argument, that it means that we cannot construct truth in the way that you think is right because people cannot compare conceptual schemes. You consider the application of the framework that we cannot care about other people's practical reason if they operate under different conceptual schemes because we cannot compare between our practical reason, which means that is game over issue. Then extend the parish argument, then sovereign unifies these assertions by the definer values, which means that only the NC framework can account for this because only it can actually construct truth. It takes out the entirety of the AC framework. You might be extending a lot of arguments from the AC framework, but insofar as I'm the only actual risk of offense here on the NC contention, that is game over, and I'm the only relevant. But now you conceded that independently every article should have voted regress the same nature. Extend the argument point that people like assurance separation will be valid, which independently turns your freedom arguments because freedom is not good if it's violated constantly, which will only mean that to avoid the same nature we need to have freedom in the first place, which means the NC comes on a higher limit and offense and find that under NC the individual rights was for making right to a conversation is making prohibited, which negates. Now I'll quickly go to the AC. You have no offense on the AC. Extend the first argument in the overview that we can always just universally specific maxims, and then we can never affirm, which means that there are actions incoherence. We can never guide actions. Game over issue. That means that even if I'm not voting the framework debate, the only relevant offense left in the round is a risk of offense on the NC because there's no we cannot determine offense on the AC insofar as that there's universalizability cannot be a test for how we guide action, which means that's a game over issue. But now I'll still win on the NC contention. Extend the Ripstein argument that rightful interactions among parents and adolescents entail duty to manage a children, which means your comparative world's interpretation because I say that parents specifically have to relate between their children, which means I meet your interpretation even if when extend comparative rules. That is a reason why parents unconditionally should hold on to their children because they are their property. In instance, for example, the car gives you is I'm repairing your car, I'm allowed to take it for a drive in the same way that parents own their children in the way that they should act, they should restrict how they act, which means that I win on your comparative worlds argument because you have no offense on the contention debate. Your only argument on the contention is you extend Jennings that is a reason to affirm, but insofar as if you consider the overview cross-examination, that is not a reason to affirm because it just shows that they are the cause of their, that means that they have the autonomy right now, but that does not mean they ought to have an autonomous medical choice specifically. So when that doesn't affirm, now you're actually you extend Ripstein, but that's insufficient insofar as you consider my Ripstein and now. So my argument comes on a higher layer due to, for example, children might have the ability to have autonomous choices, but in the instance when parents and children conflict, the parents always get the higher say, which means that you necessarily lose on substance. Theory. Overview on the theory debate. You probably should have extended the underview argument that you should be able to read one-air theory, meta theory. Insofar as you're not doing that, I can read my arguments why you should reject one-air theory. Extend rendering one-air theory on a piece. 8 point is only for transfers. One after one choose with have 2 chances. Qualitative edge outweighs their B story because they can lock up and clarify some things I drop on. B point they get to speak before and after me. Choose to get the frame debate and a debate, but the 2 and I to go for counter to each respond to the show. Well, they can choose either in the 2 or they split their theories. So actually outweighs since I can't know if I would have wanted it would actually been irrelevant. C point is that one-air theory creates a time to use the rest of the rounds inside the 1 hour and 2 hour, which is 7 minutes compared to my 2 hour, which is 6 minutes. It gives them a whole minute on the theory debate. And that's a lot of time. In the concrete event, hours their shots going inside. Needed time to execute shot and get around. D point has to lose flexibility being able to practice that without going new in the 2 which gives them the ability to effectively win the theory. Turns their 1 hour theory check science speed practice arguments. It's key to actual theory arguments, which means it's worse. Now skip the E and F point. The overview here is that not lining by these sons by collapsing abuse argument and always their abuse point. They need to auto so they need to line by the don't make arguments that there's infinite abuse if they can't read 1 hour theory. Air neg on this argument. They don't respond to the line by those arguments because my arguments already respond to that abuse claim already. Now reject 1 hour meta theory first and it's not actually oh wait, it's not a meta theory issue. Let's go to the counter. Counterinterpretation, negative may claim that they get two responses to AC spikes and returns to the F and read options that agents claim that maybe the cause of the action if the NC is not a nib. You're doing a very bad job on this argument. Your only reason is that you could not have standard engagement because you cannot go for the NC, but insofar as that you could have just kicked the entirety of the F. None of the arguments I read except for the NC are relevant anymore. You could have gone for turns. Now, the reason why the NC is not a nib, a few arguments. First, the first argument on the contention debate was that it's necessary to stop a regress to the state nature. If you prove that affirming causes a regress to the state nature, that is sufficient to affirm argument. B point is that under the Feynman argument, if you prove that consistent with the sovereign right is giving rights, that is sufficient to affirm 100% because the Feynman argument is just the reason why under the sovereign. There's no reason why we have rights at all, which means that necessarily turns to NC. You also should air an egg on this issue. It was very unclear from her speech what it meant to be a nib. The only offense she has is that there's no critical actual engagement because she has to go through all these layers. But insofar as you could just kick the entirety of the AC, that solves 100% of your abuse. But also no reason why that's a nib. She tries to make a new argument in cross-examination, but that obviously was not accepted. That was not an argument in the 1AR, which means that she should not give her leeway on this argument in the next speech. Now, the net benefit to my interpretation is that it's necessary for some sort of philosophical education to read all these arguments because it's necessary to engage the framework debate. She's going to make arguments that like this is not a unique interpretation of not a unique interpretation, but necessarily it is because you cannot if you read this interpretation, I cannot read all these things. You're holding the text of her interpretation because I cannot read all these three things, but reading these things is necessary to engage in some sort of philosophical education. So even if it's not a big benefit, that is enough of a risk of a benefit. Now, fairness is not a voter. Fairness is not a voter. First, fairness is self-debating since the warrant of the last person have valued substance, but actually going through the act of voting on theory, you vote for theory means to actually have a valued substance. Also, any reason for the judge to vote on fairness would cease to exist as possibly voters are no fairness. Two, unfairness is a constitutive debate. Differences cause debates mean activities like skill, speed, efficiency, coaching, resource. There's also exactly the source that reduces the round and percentage just like the thing. So killing the difference is arbitrary. Now your fairness argument, your arguments are just necessary for some type of sort of competitive activity. That is not a reason to vote for you. But under your interpretation first, where you can just flip a coin and that will determine the better debate. But that is not relevant. Now in your education argument, I'll concede that education is voted. Now it's just a question of who weighs on education. I have 100% strength of link back to education through my philosophical education. Her only argument is that the nib, because the NC is a nib, it kills education. And so far she has have offense education. That is game over on theory because I have counter interpretation there. Now the arguments are so that's the reason why she should lose. So now an overview on the round real quick. She has to go for 1 3. She's getting wrecked. She's losing very badly on the losing very badly on the case debate because she's conceded the Joyce argument. It's an independent reason why none of your arguments applied, and that was framing was in CX and the 1 NC, which means that she does not offense in the AC. There are no turns on the NC or no reason why the AC offense outweighs the NC. She might have offense or comparative offense on the weighing debate on the AC, but she does not have it compared to the NC. Insofar as I have 100% risk of offense, even if she has offense on the AC, she's conceded the argument of the overview that all norms under universalizability can be met, which means that there's no violation underneath her standard. Insofar as her standard is consistency with universal law. Then the next argument that you're going to vote off of are the next overview argument is that she has to respond to the reject 1AR theory argument. She's not extend that on you. She's going to say that, oh, I conceded it, but as far as I get new responses, it's not a question of new responses, but she didn't even extend that argument in the last speech, which means I get to, those arguments are valid, which means that she needs to line by line all of those. But insofar, even if I win on the counter interpretation, then that is a game over issue. That means I win on substance because she doesn't have offense there. But then she's just going to go for the shell, but she has to win that the NC's a nib to win the abuse because the only argument that is relevant is that she cannot turn the NC. You can kick the app and go for the NC, and none of the rest of my speech is relevant anymore because all of it is dependent on you winning your app framework, which means that I win.
The order will be overview, AC, NC, theory if I can.
Just overview, or you just make a new overview?
It'll be a new overview. You can fill it on the top of the app. Okay, ready? Neal makes a huge mistake. He conceives that the sovereign is subject to deontological principles, which means that the entirety of the NC is hijacked. He doesn't do any weighing, so it's very easy for you to win the app. Go there. Extend the constructivism of 198. If this were not true, the external world would be governed by laws which are causally decided how we act, so we cannot be free. The function of morality is this. Constructivists and moral questions were from asking questions. The sovereign would have no ability to act wrong, which means that there is no constraint on their action, which means that they have to devolve to deontological principles. That is cold conceded, which means that the NC is recontextualized under the app. It does not matter if he wins choice because this is a higher level framing issue. He extends the tailoring objection, but I literally just answered it. I said that it is something that is intrinsic to the maximum, which means that you cannot tailor it infinitely. For example, the fact that I'm wearing red shoes is not relevant to the maximum willing, which means that we cannot will a violation of freedom, which means that goes away. That is the only offense you could potentially have on taking out the app framework. He is conceding. He has conceded that freedom is a construct since you cannot will no ability to have freedom. He has conceded the C point that out of life treatment is subjective. There is no right answer in the deciding and post the concept of good and Ripstein that you are independent if your body is subject to your own choice. He reads a Ripstein argument that says that individual parents are the ones who are able to make decisions for them. The framing issue is that this relies on an internal link that adolescents are not the ones who are rational. He is conceding a framing issue that it is inherently a comparative question about who is better to make a situation. He is conceding weighing analysis into why violations of freedom have the strongest link to the out framework, which means that if a parent is deciding a certain situation and they are imposing a conception of good is that problematic. That is the interaction that I did in the last speech with the often he reads about how individuals have the best understanding of the situation since they have undergone treatment, which means that if a parent is deciding on the basis of individuals, and that is not problematic there. This also always on probability, since even if individuals are able to avoid the certain circumstance of having coercion, they would be able to have some sort of discussion with their parents where it is inherent to the advocacy that adolescents do not get the final say, which means he does not do and weighing analysis, which means that you have to buy mine because otherwise the run becomes irresolvable. Extend the underview. Extend the underview that he has to prove a comparative obligation for the he has to prove some sort of comparative obligation for the parents to make a decision over, which means that he does not meet his burden. He goes theory. Extend the interpretation that they admitted me, not claim that they were getting new to our responses. They suspect damage to the Avian. Read offense that claims that the agent must be the cause of their own action, but are not in the affirmative role. Read a framework of consistency with the forms. Will he does not extend the standard of substantive engagement? He will go for whatever I undercover because he gets new to responses, which means that he gets framing issues. He can also go for the terms of the F. He would also read offense and extend that as a nib, which is also reasons why his arguments do not matter. He's also conceded that reading a framework of consistency with sovereign's will is basically a nib, even if it's not. Even if it is not, that does not matter because he will always have a comparative advantage. If I just kick the F, then I for 4 minutes, and he gets to line by line that for 7 minutes. He also has a better conception of what the NC says, which means that he's always had a comparative advantage, which means that I have less ability to substantively gauge his arguments. There is less passions. He was always the winner. That means that we do not question our subjects. Fine fairness is not a voter education, so extend that education matters, since that is the only reason people debate it at the top. The debater to set a positive norm, extend from the bottom of the F that F gets 1 AR theory, but meta theory because it concerns norms creation, because ensures that cannot be infinitely abusive. This is not a framing issue. The way in which we evaluate things is not that you have to extend every specific argument. For example, I do not have to extend I from the resolution, nor do I have to extend the plain text. This is a true argument. You cannot go for new to in our responses. He would have had to make responses initially as to why he would get access to that. Also, so framing issue is that you can't pull the trigger on that. He's conceded it from the off, so I don't have to line by line.
Good.
Good.
I see the Ripstein turn.
Yeah.
get the I deleted it. Do you have it on your computer? I
Probably.
deleted the document. It's in the one end.
Jack thinks you're on the right side of the issue.
Oh.
Nina,
Yeah.
Then again, he would, wouldn't he?
can I
Sorry?
put your quarters video online?
Yeah, go for it. We should put him on the panel.
so.
Well, I have to.
Yeah, there's a ballot online.
I can't do ballots online.
Alright.
I don't have a tab room account.
Do you want to borrow my laptop?
She doesn't have a tablet account.
Yes. Because in Texas we don't use tab room.
Really? Alright, I'm gonna look at that Ripstein card too.
Okay. Give me 1 moment.
It's fine. I have it up already.
Okay.
Do I need to write it?
Yeah, you just.
Well, you can announce because we split.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, alright. You two split. That makes me the decider. Congratulations to both of y'all on making it to the Valley Mid-America Cup 2015 semi-final debate. The decision is a 2-1 for the app from Hunter College.
Man without the tavern.
I knew it was gonna happen as soon as this went to like a deontology debate. I don't think you're winning theory. I don't believe that you can just extend arguments at the bottom of the non-review. I think that's implicit, especially theory framing issues. I think you should anticipate this response because Neal's done this in every round where someone's ran 1AR theory. I feel like it's probably why you have it in there. Probably be a good idea to extend it, as well as I don't think you're answering that benefit on theory. I don't really think it's controversial. I don't think you win the theory debate. But I can explain more if you want.
No.
So from there, it comes down to, I think, a few arguments. The first is like this extension of this constructivism argument, whether or not it constrains his conception of the sovereign. So I think there's two responses here. I think even if it constrains the A subpoint is extending out of under the standard, we still answer this argument back about why we would not want to be in the state of nature, because then it would be impossible to allocate rights. The B subpoint is this argument about why it would be impossible to share our reasons. So even if it's true that practical reasons somehow constrain the sovereign, then our inability to construct morality that way, to be able to say, here's what I find as a motivating reason for action, here's what you find, we would never be able to construct it in that way. Then this framing argument, so then I think he has offense on the NC. This framing argument is, I think, the last place I potentially look to excluding the NC. I think in CX it's fairly clear, he's like, if I defend the status quo, like, is that fine? You're like, yeah. So I think that kind of really makes me uncomfortable excluding this NC, because he just says, yeah, right, whatever the status quo, they make decisions, that's fine. The sovereign says, no, that's fine. And then the next is, I think then also the NC then would create a reason for why parents would want to be the decision maker. Because in fact, I guess that's the only way that they can even talk about rights. Not upset the sovereign or go back to killing or eating each other or something. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I can go next. So, as also think the app is losing the theory debate. So the way I view this is, and this is I guess a disagreement with Jack's view. You read a paradigmatic argument that takes on the status of the default paradigm. It takes on the status of the conceded, therefore necessarily used paradigm upon a concession and extension. The default status remains unless there's a relevant time for it to be contested, and it is contested. So in other words, there's a relevant triggering event for him to contest the right to read the 1AR theory, which is you reading the 1AR theory. At that point, he can contest it. You haven't moved the argument from the default status to the conceded, uncontestable status because you haven't extended the argument. That's the way I view it. So it's not like I think you could just switch later in the debate, or like somebody could make a new argument about the paradigm without a triggering event or something. It's just like there is a relevant triggering event. He is responding to that. I would not allow him those responses if you're extending the argument, but you're not extending the argument. The reason why I view things that way is because otherwise I think it leads to too many like weird late round surprises where some argument that everyone has forgotten about just suddenly comes to life. I don't have like a high threshold for the warrant being extended given that it's conceded. What I think is important is that the signal is extended, that this is the paradigm that you need to adopt. So that's the way I view those issues. But then on the substance debate, I think it's actually relatively straightforward that the app is winning the substance debate. And that's because I agree with the arguments that Tillman is citing, but it's just that there's another issue, which is there's not the direct reasons why I should use a practical reason framework, but the arguments for why the negative framework is hijacked by the practical reason arguments, namely that the state's action to impose a paradigmatic framework is only made possible by its being a practically rational entity, which entails that the framework it imposes is a practical rationality framework. Those are arguments that I just have cold conceded in the 2N. And so I think there is that hijack. Then the only relevant question is, how am I viewing offense under that framework? And here, the thing that would potentially lead to a negative ballot is the Ripstein argument. But I think there are two problems with that issue. One is that you are also conceding, Neal, the framing on how I should evaluate offense under the framework, which is this question of who is in a better position to make the better decision between the parent and the child. And it seems like she's the only one who has arguments on that issue. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, I think it's a sort of strange thing. So like you point out that the Jennings argument only speaks to the child's being autonomous. And that might diminish its implication, setting these like weighing/framing issues aside. But the implication it would properly have is that it interacts with the Ripstein argument. Because her point is, well, that would prove that they're autonomous, so there is no real reason why we're in a situation of possession, meaning management, but not use for your own purposes, which is the Ripstein point. So it's just not clear to me why Ripstein would be a reason to negate on the app framework under her framing of how I weigh offense under it. And B, it's not clear why the Ripstein argument's assumption, so it's not clear why the argument is relevant. It's also not clear why its assumption survives the Jennings argument, which is the argument that she extends.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So on the hijack, how do
Yes.
you like view like as like the Joyce argument and the overview argument something like disadd to the hijack? Because like
View what?
the Joyce argument and the overview argument on the framework as like a take out of the hijack because
No, because the place where the hijack comes is on the imposition, which framework is imposed.
But doesn't that take out like the first starting point in practical reason, which means that even if it's a
No,
hijack,
it takes out. Well, yes. It would take out, for example, if I were to venture a claim like practical reason is if I were to say the state has to follow practical reason because practical reason has some justification for it that mandates people follow it or something, then maybe I would take that out. But the point is, the app is making arguments. The state's going to be imposing a framework. So now we're at the bottom of your framework. We've already granted the Joyce point. The reason why the state just gets to pick a framework, the reason why we don't say first which framework is correct, and then the state is correct if they pick that framework, incorrect if not, is like the Joyce argument, right? but now we're conceding that we impose a framework. And she's just saying it's not just any framework that can be imposed, it's practical rationality that's imposed because of the nature of the state. So it's conceding state imposition. It's just saying the state imposes this framework. Now, I mean, to me, that seems like it's probably untrue. But this is like a pretty big part of the 1AR extension strategy of the app framework, and it's just like none of that stuff is contested so far as I can see in the 2 lines.
And then how do you evaluate the argument in the framework overview? Like all norms are consistent under universalizability?
Oh yeah, by my flow you're just incorrect. She does answer that argument. It's the essential features argument that she makes.
Okay.
The red shoes example or whatever.
I actually end up granting the 1AR theory. I think that the 1AR makes an argument that extends that you cannot get new 2NR responses. She has 2 warrants. She says speech time is very clear, specified the burden. Even if not everything in the underview is extended, I take it as pretty implicit in the 1AR that she means to say she gets 1AR theory. I understand the concern with late breaking extensions of little things in the AF, but if that extension is just the fact that she gets 1AR theory and she's reading a minute plus long theory shell, I don't think that's something that really disadvantages the negaton. But I end up thinking that the theory argument is not won by the AF as well. Just lack of offense on the standards level. I think he has a ton more to fill education, and you don't prove that this neg is actually nib, nor that he had multiple outs, because if it's really just NC, AC, and you could collapse to 1, then you get to choose what the debate is about. So you make the debate about 1 out. There's no advantage to 2NR collapsing, and I don't think that you really have a voter here. I think that the true response in the 2NR that the 2NR should make is that this is really a substantive structural issue. Like, I went NC-AC, there's nothing unfair about this negative strategy at all. Yeah, I read lots of things, get over it. I would have been pretty amenable to that sort of response. The framework hijack, I think, is one. The 1AR is pretty clear. I think the top versus bottom is a good metaphor to think about it. That we can grant all the parish stuff. We can grant the sovereign resolves conceptual disputes, the Joyce that constructs truth, your conception of constructivism. We can grant the regress argument. The sovereign chooses what constitutes rights, but the way it should do that is practical reason. Interesting side note is that there is a good bit of debate in kind of Hobbes' interpretation about whether the sovereign should make decisions according to things like practical reason or Kant or what philosophers of law say, like natural law theory, whether the sovereign should abide by that or which way Hobbes goes on this question. So if you all wanted to look more into that, could recommend a good bit of authors on that debate. So I thought that was a interesting way for this debate to develop. So it comes down to AF framework. The tailoring objection is answered by the 1AR. There's no independent reason to prefer the NC. The hijack is sufficient. So Ripstein evidence. I think the Ripstein and AF offense are pretty similar. They're both talking about imposing a kind of conception of the good or a violation of someone's freedom on what they want to do. But I agree with the 2AR that this Ripstein card assumes that children are property or don't have decision-making capacities, so that right, that violation is mitigated, right? So if I am thinking about parents over adolescents or adolescents over parents, I at least have some weighing argument, which is there's a risk that adolescents are not property, and so that right is not as strong to their freedom. So I resolve that in favor of the AF. Good debate, y'all.
Yes, ma'am. I do
Do
not
you have
have.
electronic issues still in the game?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how did you vote?
If you want to
It
delete
doesn't
this
matter.
stuff.
I voted
Oh,
negative.
yeah.
I was on the bottom of
You
the
voted negative, but if you'd like to come to the tavern after I get this round out and get this
Oh, like
solved,
delete
we'll
from the
solve
flash,
that
your
for
stuff
you.
from the
It's
flash
okay.
drive.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay. This is my last round. I can judge anyway.
Well, I meant just in general, not in this tournament. Once you're linked forever, sir.
My information element was. It's not
What?
Well,
What? You just
he's a
said
silly
make an
guy.
account. Just use your balance, your email.
Just